and I think we really need to crack on. So first, as an MC, one of the things you want to be able to say is, our next speaker needs no introduction. And it's true. Our next speaker needs no introduction. Malte Ubl.
All right, good morning. Thanks for having me here. I'm the first speaker. I get to define the vibe of the conference. So should we tune it up or down? All right. Up. All right, let's go. Let's fucking go. All right. So I don't know why I made this title, actually building agents and not just talking about it, because I'm very much just yapping. We're not building an agent right now. But the goal of my talk today is that you come out of this talk and you have, and I hate this word, methodology in your head for how to select the right project to pick for the first agent you build that is actually a successful project. All right, cool. To ground ourselves, because the first talk of the day, and I think this will be helpful for other speakers as well. Who here has already shipped an agent in their career? All right. Let's call it 40%. My thesis is that in like a year, like everyone will raise their hand. Because if you actually figure out how to do it and which projects to build, these are very successful and very helpful. But agents are still new technology, and whenever you have a new technology, and this might have been, I don't know, mobile apps in 2010, or I don't know, the web in 1994, you define things, right? It's a measure of immaturity in a way that you still have to like talk about what something is. So let's talk about what agents are. They are, according to Anthropic, I think this is probably the most popular definition, LLMs autonomously using tools in a loop. And like this definition is like, it's actually horrible because it doesn't tell you at all what it does, right? It's just like, it's actually an implementation detail exposed as a definition. But it's still useful if you actually want to build one. Like that is really useful. Like this is what you're doing. Got this definition here from Google. AI systems designed to perceive their environment, make decisions, and take autonomous action to achieve user-defined goals. All right, so this is actually useful, right? Actually, an actual definition that, so it's something about like doing something autonomously that has an actual goal set to it. All right, I will contribute a definition myself. I'm gonna go out of the way, because you can't even see it. Agents are a new kind of software, is my thesis, that we always wanted to build, but couldn't for economic reasons, because it was just too difficult. To illustrate this even worse, look at the worst ever diagram you've seen in your life. So this blue circle represents all software that's nice to have, that we would love to build, right? And then, like, we couldn't actually build all of it. There was some software we should never have built in the first place, but like, it was difficult to fill out these circles, and agents essentially are just making the filling in the circle of software that would be awesome to have. And the reason why they do that is because you can now like kind of, you can just rely on the model to make decisions in a way where that was just really, really difficult to build in the olden days, right? Because you would have all these if statements, all these special cases, and now you can rely on the emergent behavior of the model to fill these things out. And like more concretely, this new kind of software is really automation of workflows that were previously non-automatable, right? Again, the same point, and like I mean workflows here in this like practical way. Sometimes people have definitions. Sometimes I don't know. Yesterday, someone tweeted that workflows are DAX, directed acyclic graphs. That they're wrong. This is just like something you do at work, right? You do workflows. I have a graph here. Workflows. This is the simplest possible workflow. It has no branches or loops, but it could, right? There's a trigger, like something triggers the workflow, step 1, 2, 3, and some kind of output. And to make that agentic, you just replace one of the steps by an agent, which can now make decisions. It can call tools like this. And then in practice, maybe the tool actually happens to be another workflow, sub-workflow, or people use fancy language like sub-agent, right? That just means that this tool of the agent happens to be another agent. But like, you don't need any like fancy protocols like A2A or like, don't think so much in fanciness. It's just like tools are functions, agents are functions, so you can use agents as sub-agents. All right. Did I mention I work at Vercel? So we make two things that are really relevant. AI SDK, if you're into TypeScript, probably the best way to build agents. And then we just last week released our workflow abstraction called Use Workflow, which are worth checking out. But I'm not actually going to go too deep into the code side of things today. But especially if people want to nerd out about how to model workflows in machine language, I would love to chat over lunch or dinner or whatever. Cool. But my talk is really about what agents to build, okay? So what agents are we building? Obviously, like many companies are like putting down top-down mandates, all right? I watched the Salesforce keynote, and we're building agents this year, right? And then you probably also, if you're like super online like me, see these statistics like 94% of AI projects fail. And I have a thesis of why that is. It's because, first of all, our intuitions for how good AI is are wrong, because AI is incredible at coding, and it's not as good at essentially any other task, right? And so you have to pick tasks that are easy enough to do for the AI to actually excel at, right? And so these tasks need to be like boring. They need to be like low cognitive load. Which doesn't mean, again, like it's still 2 years ago you could have never dreamed of implementing them, but don't start with the most difficult thing in your company, right? Is kind of a message. And so I mentioned how I have this like methodology for figuring out what agent to build. And it all centers around one single question, which is you go and you interview your employees and you ask them, what do you hate most about your job? Or like the variant of like, what busy work would you love to never do again, right? And these questions are magical because they yield answers that people, why do they hate it? They hate it because it's boring, it's repetitive, it doesn't tickle their brain, right? And so it happens to yield exactly the type of task that a 2025 frontier model is exceedingly good at, right? Because it doesn't get bored. It doesn't mind doing it hundreds of times a day, hundreds of times a second, because it's just a computer, right? So this is the type of task you need to do. And I have a bunch of examples from my company, Vercel, where we're building agents. And these are agents that are internal stuff, like internal to our company, where we just wanted to make things better, right? And so we went department by department and just basically asked people exactly this question. And my point is that if you do that at your company, you'll have similar answers, right? And many of you, who works at a startup? All right, 50%, yeah. Obviously, maybe you don't have a finance department where it's like one guy, right? I mean, obviously they also want to be scaled, but like you can go like to any company, right, and interview their finance department, and they probably will give you great ideas what kind of agent as a service products. By the way, don't say agent as a service out loud as the acronym. It's ASS. Yeah, so anyway, like if you're into that, it's a great way to discover stuff. So we went across Vercel and went to the go-to-market department, and they were telling us, so whenever a lead comes in, this literally means like the contact sales form, that they spend about 15 minutes enriching the data before they can actually talk to a person, right? And so, okay, follow-up question, how do you do that? And so they were like, okay, I go to their LinkedIn, right? Makes sense. Then you Google the company, you want to know, like, are they worth talking to? Are they big enough? And then what they did is they copy-pasted that stuff into a spreadsheet in 2025, right? So it's about 15 minutes of busy work every lead. And so we were thinking, that seems like something an agent would be able to do, right? Researching people on LinkedIn. So we built a lead processing agent, which, again, start the contact sales form, which is just a form on the website. And hopefully, I don't know, maybe some of you have actually filled this out at some point. So user hits that submit button, triggering the workflow. That kicks off the main agent, which has a reasoning loop. And it first starts to check if this look like spam, low quality submission, or support request. So it turns out people love putting support requests into your contact sales form. Maybe if you have a company, you've experienced this yourself. Obviously, the agent can just route it to support because it probably actually won't be that great for the customer if the salesperson answers their support request, right? Cool. And then the agent researches the company. And the way it does it, it has a tool to look at their Google, look at LinkedIn, right? Exactly the same thing the human would have done. Now, the research part, again, that's a sub-agent. But again, as I was saying earlier, that's not a complicated thing. It just means that there's an agent that's specialized in researching people on LinkedIn and Google, and that's all it knows to do, and it comes back with the information. And finally, it makes a draft email if the lead is qualified, right? And then we give that draft email to the actual salesperson who then can personalize it, because humans are actually better at this, and send it to the customer. And finally, stuff happens up in Salesforce or whatever you like. Hopefully it's not Salesforce actually in your case, but there you go. In our case, so it has saved literally hundreds of days. There was a press article in Business Insider that said we had 10 people doing this work and we fired 9. That's actually not true. We're heavily growing our sales organization, but it definitely saves a lot of work. And you can go to vercel.com/oss-lead-agent to get the open source version of this. The reason why we're open sourcing this is not because this is not an agent as a service thing, right? You're not supposed to drop this into your company, but I think it actually helps a lot to see very concretely how this is implemented in this year, because again, there's a lot of talk about this, but this is just very concrete, agent implemented, and maybe it's helpful for you, or maybe it's just a great way to figure out what to do. Cool. Okay, that was the go-to-market department. The next department we talked to is our anti-abuse team. So it turns out that there were about 400 million deployments to Vercel in the last year, which actually is a relatively large number. And what happens is that once you're at that scale, there's lots of bad stuff happening, right? People want to put in phishing, very popular. There's scams, impersonation, all kinds of bad stuff, right? And the way we handle that is that there's this abuse agent now, which the trust and safety team uses to review the reports automatically and make more consistent decisions. Again, similar thing, there's an abuse form on the website. People can put in potentially abusive, malicious stuff, and our large-scale reporters actually have an API, and so we actually are getting thousands and thousands of reports per week. Every time anyone is submitted, it goes into abuse form, kicks off the reasoning loop. Again, this looks very similar than the other agent, although the other agent was for making money. And so that agent has a tool to look at the reported project, obviously, has a tool to look at the deployed assets, right? Has a tool to look at the team data, like how old is that account, for example, the domains they registered, the payment info, did they pay their bills for a year, or did the account register yesterday and uses a prepaid credit card, right? You kind of want to look at these things. And then it has a multimodal model to look at the actual visual thing that was reported. If it obviously looks like a Facebook login page, you kind of know, probably not that good of a website to have. And then it summarizes the findings with a confidence score and recommends to block, manual review, or maybe it's a false positive, right? Which obviously does happen. And then again, it goes into Salesforce, where the team can, operate on the queue. Now, as a hosting provider, obviously our default thing isn't to take down websites. We actually try to never do that, right? So we actually do not let this agent just run wild. But you can just imagine the difference of, as the human operator, seeing everything you would have researched already in a list, and then making a quick decision how much faster that is, right? And so since we introduced this, we got about a 59% reduction in time per case. Although I was actually talking to the team late last week, and they were saying, we need to probably revise this number, and it has gotten substantially better even, right? And you can easily imagine that you can just go so much better on these investigations. Cool. So this agent we actually not open sourcing because there's a bit of a cat and mouse game situation. But if you're actually in a similar situation, you can hit me up, and I'm very happy to actually share the code privately. Very cool. So for the last department that we talked to in this situation, we talked to our data folks. And I think this is something, again, like that essentially every company has. Probably you've been in the situation where you go and want to know something, and you remember there's this dashboard somewhere, and you don't find it, right? I used to work at Google where we had like 15 different platforms of dashboard. You would never know anything where anything is. And like if you're in this room and you need some data, maybe you write SQL yourself, right? But like in a normal company, most people don't know how to do this, right? And so more realistically, what they do is they kind of ask like the central data team, saying like, hey, can I have a dashboard to find out like this particular piece of information, right? And then if you're lucky, maybe you get on their backlog. If you're not lucky, there might be no capacity for the rest of the quarter or something like that, right? And so we were wondering, like, can you just fully automate this, right? Can I, for example, go into Slack and say, hey, data agent, can you answer this question to me? And what we figured out is that the answer is yes. You can actually very easily make a really, really good data agent that does better at writing SQL than essentially all text-to-SQL tools on the market. And now the question is, why would you beat this like probably super high-powered $100 million startup that specializes in this? Why can't you beat it yourself with building an agent? And the answer is that you're doing the work of teaching the agent about your business and giving it semantic understanding of how your business works so it can actually make good decisions. So again, the schema is there's now a Slack message that kicks off the agent. It will then look at, roughly what data to look at, build an query with like the right tables, right columns, and again, looking at your curated semantic catalog of the information about the company that tells it what to do. It executes the query, and then comes back, summarizing the result in a human-readable format, does graphics, etc., and finally goes back to the Slack thread with the answer to the original question. In fact, you were seeing this 400 million deployments per year stat. I actually researched this with this agent, kind of saying, hey, what is the right way to do this? Very cool. Cool, and again, we have credible information. We have this one open source as well. So vercel.com/oss-data-analyst has the open source project. Once again, this is not an agent as a service business, but I think it's a great reference architecture for how to build this type of research data analysis agent, because I think this is something that either you need directly in your company or it's a great building block for a larger agent. Cool. So with that, these were just a few examples, right? Like obviously there's this whole universe of agents to build. My goal was mostly to show you kind of what's possible and to inspire you what you can do for your business to move it forward. Just want to reiterate that there's this question of what do you hate most about your job that is really powerful to finding kind of the low-hanging fruit of what agents to build. And as I was saying, it's the sweet spot for current generation AI because it finds these problems that are actually easy enough for AI to do. In the area, you can do something else, but this is what you want to do today. And because these things are repetitive and stuff that companies do a lot, they're also high business impact. And with that, thank you very much. The websites to check out, and thank you so much.